It's a really tough time to be in the tech landscape right now. Unfortunately, I'm seeing more and more layoffs, so I hope it's going well for everyone. But I did want to provide some thoughts, as I know many watching my channel are trying to break into tech sales for the first time, or maybe even make moves from SDR to account executive. And I wanted to comment on how I think both in the short term, as well as the long term, maybe on a 5-year outlook, all of these layoffs are really going to impact the tech sales profession. I've mentioned this in a few videos already, but certainly if you're trying to break in for the first time, unfortunately what this means is the talent pool is now a lot bigger. So the companies that do have SDR openings, a lot of times they're going to have the luxury of interviewing 5 to 10 to 20 plus candidates that already have SDR experience. A year ago, this was definitely not the case. They were very eager to get entry-level talent and were willing to hire in many people that didn't have any experience, maybe didn't have any tech experience as well. And I still think there's opportunity, don't get me wrong. I still think if you put in the work, if you study, and you get ready and prepare yourself to break in as an SDR, it's possible. But as I've mentioned in other videos, you now have to be the best candidate amongst a sea of 50 to 100 applicants at any given time. Now, I'll tell you strategically, again, there's two different ways to look at this if you're breaking in. Smaller companies, maybe Series A, Series B, are always going to be eager for talent because it's very difficult to get proven players to take a chance on a startup, especially right now with all the economic uncertainty. So if you're breaking in, again, apply all over the place, don't get me wrong, but I think you're gonna have the most luck going to a younger company like a Series A, Series B, and break your way in there and hopefully find success. That does come with trade-offs. Again, usually those younger companies don't have necessarily well-established training programs. But again, right now, depending on your situation, it may just be worth getting into a company, trying to figure it out. And then a year from now, hopefully things will turn around. Maybe if that company specifically isn't the best place, you'll have other opportunities as well. Now's a great time to get into a well-established company, a brand name, mission-critical software or technology as well. But those companies now, again, are going to have their pick of the litter when it comes to highly qualified candidates. You're gonna have more candidates that maybe over the last year or two took a chance on a startup. Now they want to break their way back into these safer companies. I have to admit, that's kind of a move that I made recently, having been in a startup that didn't really work out. I went to a market leader and a company that has a very proven training program and a very proven product that's very well defensible, even in times like this. And that goes to my last point on the short term, which is if you're breaking in, try as best as possible to find mission critical technology. Tech sales is often misused in that it represents pretty much anything that is software. While again, anything that is software sales could include, I don't know, marketing tools, HR, even like hardcore engineering tools like infrastructure, cloud provisioning, all of these different things, right? And while it's really difficult, I can make a video on this and comment below if you'd like me to talk more about the types of tech I would sell in 2023. But you really need to go out of your way to try and find companies that are selling technology that is absolutely critical for a business. It's not a luxury to have, like as an example, again, I don't know the marketing space well, so I don't want to overreach here, but if you're selling a marketing tool that helps creators, spend more on ads and get more of a return on investment, that may help, right? That's not a bad thing inherently, but also with budgets being removed, with the economy kind of sloping down, there are many companies now that are going into preservation mode. They're not looking to deploy extra capital. So you need to be in a place where maybe you're a tool that allows you to do way more with less staff. Maybe, they just laid off 10% of their engineering team. Your tool automates a lot of those processes and they can still achieve at the same level or even higher with lower headcount. And additionally too, it's really difficult in the scope of this video if you're not familiar with the technical landscape. Like one company I interviewed with recently, HashiCorp, it's a great company. They have software that allows you to deploy on clouds on any infrastructure at scale. And once you get on their product, once you're a large organization with 500, with 1,000 and 10,000, etc. employees, it is absolutely mission critical. Like you cannot live without that product. It's such a great product and very, very well defended. But also now I want to transition that focus to maybe a 5-year outlook. What does this mean long term? Because certainly, over the last couple of years, tech has been an incredible industry to be in. I still think there's tons of opportunity going forward, but I do think when it comes specifically to tech sales, that the landscape is going to change over the next 5 years. For the companies that do survive, they're finally going to have that chance to take a look back at the data and where they really overstaffed maybe over the last 2 years. They allocated a ton of money towards their sales team, towards SDRs. But what you're gonna see now is companies over the next year are going to evaluate how many opportunities did we generate with a much larger team versus now. And I think what you'll see, especially with all these different sales tools, there's so many tools, SalesLoft, Outreach, Gong, etc., right, that have come into play that automate a lot of simple tasks for sales team and allow them to accomplish more with less. What I think you'll see as a result of the economic downturn is that a lot of companies are going to realize going forward, even when things turn around, even when the market starts to trend up, they'll add headcount, but nowhere near the rate that they did before. They're really gonna put an emphasis on maximizing the use of their sales tools, because I also think what you've seen too, there's a lot of tools, credit to them, they're great tools, but they allow you to send way more emails, way more calls, things of this nature. And it almost got to the point over the last 2 years that sales teams were so big, everyone was trying to sell everything, that like people almost aren't even responding to anything sales at all, even if it's completely relevant. And so what I think you'll see is a bit of a reset both at the macro and micro level. At the macro level, because unfortunately a lot of sales teams, a lot of companies are just closing down, you're going to see less outreach, less cold emailing and cold calling. But what you're going to start to see is a shift towards strategic and much more highly skilled sales professionals, both at the SDR level and the account executive. And that brings me to my second point on more of the account executive level. So yes, you're going to be accomplishing more with less SDRs, but also I think this shift, at least over the next 5 years, is always going to change. And again, this is obviously my opinion, but right now companies are going into preservation mode, like I mentioned. What this means is they're trying to make sure as best as possible, all of their paying customers do not churn during this downturn or leave the product altogether. So yes, there's gonna be a huge emphasis on customer success. You're gonna see teams double down there. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw some account executives make that transition more towards a formal customer success title. But on top of that, I think over the next 5 years, you're going to see account executives at the highest and most strategic levels be very, very highly skilled sales professionals. And I'm not saying that every single one of them has to have like an engineering background, but I've talked about in other videos how in my case, I love selling really highly technical tools. I am a former engineer. That gives me a huge advantage when selling both on the business and technical side. I think you're going to see a lot of companies hold out and be very, very selective for someone with either 10 to 20 years of sales experience, maybe doesn't have that background, or you're going to see companies where they have a salesperson with 3 to 5 years of experience that has extensive career experience as an engineer, in customer success, in support, right? And you're gonna see that transition now to where deal cycles are going to take longer, companies are going to be more hesitant to spend money, and what that's going to require is you as an account executive are going to have to build very, very strong technical and business cases, whereas a deal maybe in the past took 6 months, it's now gonna take 9. Maybe really expensive strategic deals took 12 to 18. You're probably gonna see minimally 12 to 18, maybe even 24-month deal cycles now. But that being said, the stakes are that much higher. If you can land at a time like this and break into an account as they grow back with the economy, as you get your technology in there and hopefully things turn around rather quickly, they add headcount, that means more seats, more licenses, more consumption of the product. It's that much more important now at the account executive level to be very, very highly skilled as opposed to a great networker, a great outbound and cold caller. I think you're gonna see a shift where SDRs again are accomplishing more with less, and you're gonna see a shift away from having full cycle account executives, especially at that top level, and they're gonna be very, very focused and required to go incredibly deep with a handful of 5 to 10 accounts at any given time to make sure when they have those opportunities, they're winning that business. And again, even from a technical perspective, like I mentioned earlier, maybe on the short term, yes, you want to be selling mission critical products, but I also think you're going to see a lot of these Series A, Series B, Series C startups that have had funding over the last 3 to 5 years, unfortunately are going to consolidate. They're going to get acquired by a relevant technology leader in their space, right? And you're also going to see from a company standpoint now more than ever, if you're not a company that is a very well recognized startup, if you're not a public tech company, and on the flip side, if you are like an AWS of the world, a Google Cloud, a Microsoft, as an executive now, it is much safer to pick a large and well-established company's products because you have no risk of the company going under. You have no risk of the technology being acquired and never updated again. And so from a risk aversion standpoint, while again, I know if you're trying to break in for the first time, it's probably going to be easiest at these smaller startups. It is going to be very difficult on the executive side, on the actual closing business side. If you're not at a brand name, if you're not at a very safe product, take the cost out for just a moment, then it's going to be very difficult to progress deals in this time. So again, just restating, I think in the short term, if you can, as best as possible, it is definitely possible to break in, but you've got to realize what you're up against. You need to know that you're going up against 50 to 100 candidates at any given time. You have to take that mindset, and I've talked about in other videos how you need to prepare yourself accordingly. On the longer term, again, if you can get into a safe brand, if you can get into a very well-recognized startup, doesn't necessarily have to be maybe a public tech company, but certainly from a leadership standpoint, you're gonna want people who left Google, who left Meta, who left Amazon, right? Like very well recognized brands and connections. And you as a seller are going to have to equip yourself that much more. So when you have interviews, when you land that job, when you get into it further, whereas in the past you could kind of go through the motions, a lot of people were willing to take meetings with anyone just to better hear them out. Now engineers are more discretionary with their time. They don't want to look like they're wasting time talking to a startup they're never going to use, because unfortunately layoffs are happening. They have to protect their own job and livelihood, right? And so if you're at these safer companies, if you're becoming more strategic, again, you're never gonna be in a situation where you're expected to write code, but if you can't carry a conversation with some of the top engineers, if you can't get technical buy-in and business buy-in simultaneously, it's gonna be really difficult to progress your career. It's gonna be really difficult to get a great job right now in these uncertain times. So not the most pleasing message, but again, I think sales is always going to be around. There's never gonna be a situation where companies are spending millions or tens of millions of dollars and not have a team of sales and sales engineering specialists guide them through that process. But that being said, with unfortunately all the layoffs, with all the consolidation, I think you're going to see a much lower emphasis, especially at that entry level, where you need to come in and really show why you are better than candidates. You need to come in and really show from day one that you're going to be effective technically, from a business proficiency, from the job itself. And I think over the next 5 years, while maybe 5 to 10 years from now, we start to see sales teams again at the size they were over the last 2 years, I certainly think in the next and upcoming 3 to 5 years, it's gonna be much smaller. It's gonna be that much harder. But again, just work harder, get through it, leverage all the resources that are available, and I still think it's very possible to break in. So good luck, and we'll see you on our next video.